I think the two things that I've thought about the most when it comes to hell in reconsidering and rethinking it in like all the study that I've done are like kind of boils down to these two things for me at least. And I really like a lot of the things that you say. I really like your book. I'm not like sold on one thing 100%. I would say if someone made me label myself, I'd probably be total restoration. But I just think there's a lot of different sides to it that I'm still studying, and
Yeah.
it might take me a long time to get somewhere. Um, but I think the two like main things I think of when I think about this topic is about punishment. Like, what is the purpose of punishment, and also like what is the actual punishment for like the crime that's committed, right? Because I think for myself, it doesn't make sense that I would be punished infinitely for something that was a finite like grievance, right? So if I
Right.
sin against God and I do something as like a finite being, it doesn't make sense that the punishment for my crime would be eternal separation from God, never able to be restored for any reason, right? It would make sense that if God was a loving God, that and if I could come to an understanding of what I do as bad, that I could change and then become some sort of productive part of his kingdom, right? That's what we try to do with our criminals, right? We punish them for the things they do, and we hope to give them a punishment that's adequate and fits their crime, right? We're all finite. We give them finite punishments, and we hope that they can become like contributing parts of society again, right? That's the point of our whole criminal justice system, is that we want to try to restore people. And so a lot of the thought I've been doing around this topic is punishment in the Bible restorative, or is it just for the sake of punishment? And is it both of those things ever, or is it always just restorative? And that's sort of the thing I've been mulling over a lot lately.
Mhm.
Those are good things to think about for sure. Let me just encourage you one place to look at. There's a man who's a wonderful author back in the 1800s, and I think into the early 1900s. His name was George MacDonald. And
Yeah.
he was in fact, C.S. Lewis acknowledged him as somebody that he learned a tremendous amount from. In fact, C.S. Lewis wrote a book called George MacDonald, an Anthology, where he makes a lot of quotations from George MacDonald and spiritual writings. But one of the things that George MacDonald did was he put out these unspoken sermons. And one unspoken sermon is on justice, and that deals with that particular issue very well. And he's got a wonderful perspective of how he works in that. Just to get to some of the, but so George MacDonald, unspoken sermon on justice. You'll find that is very encouraging to read that. But God, you're not married. Are either of you guys married?
He's almost married. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm getting married in June.
Okay, but you don't have children. When you have children, you will realize that you discipline them. There's positive things even with the punishment. I spanked my kids because I knew that was a very effective way to get their attention and to stop them from doing something that was ultimately going to hurt them. Right? Mm-hmm. So there is an aspect of punishment that brings pain in people's lives, and certain people need to have that punishment that leads to pain. They need to acknowledge in their own hearts that what I've done to hurt that person really is painful. A person who rapes a woman, I mean, he's got to understand what has been done. That's just wicked. And so there is that aspect of it. But ultimately, everything is it's more chastisement in the sense of, I want to bring some kind of recognition and restoration. I don't want to just punish for the sake of punishing. I think in one of my videos, or not a video, but I was in an interview at one point, and I made the comment that God is not just punishing and punishing and punishing. You just kind of keep on going on forever. That it's one thing to say punishment, but punishment forever, that's a totally different issue. We see punishment all the time in this life.
Absolutely.
We see people, when I worked with the Bowery Mission in New York City, it's dealing with drug addicts, alcoholics all the time. It's to try to restore these people. They come in and you talk to them. A lot of them wonderful people. You get to know some of these homeless guys and some of the people that are on drugs. And they will tell kids, they say, don't get on these drugs while
Hmm.
they're still fighting it themselves, because they know that they've gotten caught, but they don't know how to get
Yeah.
out of it. That's why they come
Right.
to a conviction, and they realize that God's got the only answer that can bring them freedom for
Hmm.
what they're doing. But the purpose of punishment from God's perspective is not just to bring pain, it's to somehow restore the person. So,
Right.
and to cleanse things, God, like when he brought judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, it was to cleanse the land.
Hmm.
I think I say it in that book, or else my other book that I'm writing now. I deal with in my one I'm writing right now, the one Searching for Truth. That one I've got 2 chapters on why does God allow pain and suffering in the world,
Hmm.
and I do address the issue of, well, why would God command his people to wipe out Canaan, to kill uh, everybody there? That's a big issue.
Right.
Isn't that being kind of cruel? Um, by the way, if there is no potential for a person to come into God's presence after this life, then that was really, I mean, you didn't even give anybody a chance.
Yeah.
It was interesting. My internet connection is unstable, so hopefully it'll be okay. I was in seminary. I'm in a class, and I don't know what the class is about, what was going on there. But the professor made a side comment. It was not
Hmm.
even a major part, just sort of a throwaway comment. And it changed my perspective on things. He said, in ancient Canaan, venereal disease and communicable diseases were rampant because of their wicked lifestyle.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, no wonder you got to burn it. How do you get rid of it? And what people don't understand is that wickedness, sin, brings pain to present generations,
Hmm.
but also to future generations. If you have, um, it's not so much now, but when the AIDS epidemic came out
Hmm.
a number of years ago, one of the most tragic things in the world was finding these babies that were born with AIDS.
Hmm.
It hadn't anything to do with them, but they
Right.
were experiencing pain and suffering because of something that their parents had done. Now, that's a small example, but when you've got rampant, ungodly character going on, what it does is it brings uh, pain to that generation, but also to future generations. And God,
Hmm.
in his wisdom, says, I got to wipe it out. I got to stop it right at that point. That's what he did with Noah. He said, okay, there's wickedness. Um, every thought, imagination of mankind is evil continually. Well,
Hmm.
interestingly, with regard to Canaan, he says to Abraham, I'm going to wipe out Canaan. Not yet, because the sin of the Amorites is not yet full. I have to wait until it gets to the point where I have to say, okay, now I got to shut it down.
Hmm.
So there is a point where sin leads to pain and suffering. God says there's a limit. Within your body, one of the things I talk about in my new book that I hope will get published is torture. You know, and I deal with that. And I was reading a book by a man named Captain McDaniel, who was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam during the war. And he was there, I think, like 6 years or something like that. And it was horrible. They were torturing him and different kinds of things. And what you realize is that at some point, torture doesn't work anymore because the body goes numb, an area of your body goes numb, or you go unconscious. So there's only a certain level. God has allowed a level of pain that any individual or culture can experience, but he's got a limit at it. Now, we may think that the limit is too far. We may think, well, God, you should have stopped the limit a lot earlier than that. But God, in his wisdom, knows exactly how far to allow the limit to go. And in a culture, he stops it at a certain point. In an individual person, he will stop it at a certain point. And then there are a bunch of other things too that God does. So that's not the only answer to that. But that was one of the things that just totally changed my perspective. And I thought, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. There are a lot of things that God does that we don't know about. We're finite. We're trying to figure out how does this infinite being do things. And he's revealed a tremendous amount in his word. But there are some things that he has not. For example, in the book of Job, Job and his friends are trying to figure out why is it that Job is suffering the way he is. I mean, this guy loses his children, he loses all his property, and then he gets this terrible physical disease. I mean, this is horrible. Well, his friends come along and say, well, it's because of your own personal sin, Job. I mean, it's because you are a wicked, wicked sinner. I mean, otherwise it could never have happened. And Job is saying, well, wait a minute, I'm not a wicked sinner. I mean, I'm sure I'm not perfect, but I sure haven't done anything that bad. What he didn't know was something that God was doing in the angelic world. He was showing the angelic world, and through the book of Job, showing our natural world how a man of integrity deals with pain and suffering. I'll just one other little nugget here. This is not original with me. It was from a friend. In Job chapter 1, God calls Satan. He says, Satan, have you considered my servant Job, an upright man, blameless in all of what he does, a man who fears God and shuns evil? And Satan says, the only reason he serves you is because you give him good things. You take those good things away, he'll hurt you to your face. And so God says, okay, you can take away his things. You cannot touch his body. Satan comes and he wipes out everything. I mean, including his children, right? And everything that he has. At the end of it, Job says, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Second chapter, God calls Satan again. He uses the exact same words. Have you considered my servant Job, a man of upright character, blameless in all of his ways, a man who fears God and shuns evil? And then he adds a phrase that he did not have in chapter 1. And the phrase is, who did not give up his integrity when you incited me against him. So the question is, why did God bring up the issue of integrity in chapter 2 and not in chapter 1? Because in chapter 2 or in chapter 1, Satan might have been right. The only way you know if a person has true integrity is if he's gone through trials and gone through them successfully. Then you can say that person has true integrity. Another little nugget of that is in chapter 1, God said that that Satan could take away all of the things that he had, but he could not touch his body. Satan comes, kills his children, but not his wife, because the two were one.
Oh, interesting.
She was part of his body, that part. Two were one at that point. So Satan could not kill his wife. He could only kill his children. Anyway, I do talk about that a little bit in my second book.
Very interesting, yeah.
But
yeah, definitely. Do you have any other questions so far?
There are things that happen in life that we don't know God's perspective, what he's doing, but they're good purposes.
Yeah.
He wanted to show the angelic world, he wanted to show our world how a man of integrity really works. So he was not testing Job in the sense of trying to see if Job is a man of integrity. God knew it. He said that at the very beginning. What he's doing is employing Job in his service to use him as somebody that will demonstrate to the angelic world and to the material world that we live in, our earthly world, how a true man of integrity addresses and deals with difficult trials.
Very interesting. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Well, we're about 2 hours in. I've loved this conversation so far. It's been really awesome for me. You have any other questions you want to ask?
No, I think this has been great. I think it's a really enlightening episode on the introduction to total ultimate restoration. Yeah,
I call it ultimate restoration.
Yeah, I want to make
universal
sure
salvation, ultimate.
Yeah, I want to stay away from the word universal because I know it gets tricky. But yeah, I mean, this is a topic that clearly has been talked about since the beginning of the church. With like we talked about with Gregory of is it Nyssa?
Gregory of Nyssa is how I pronounce it.
Nyssa.
However, they do it in the actual Greek. I'm not sure. I mean, I am Greek, but I don't speak Greek fluently to know how the pronounce this word.
Right. Yeah, but all that to say, like this is a very old topic, a very old tradition or belief that's been held in Christianity for apparently since its onset, and it's something to keep striving after. And I'm sure even if like us here or the people listening, if you guys get like confused or maybe overwhelmed, don't worry, don't feel overwhelmed, don't feel like, oh no, my world is shattering. It's okay. Like there's God is a very gracious and patient God, and he will walk you through this if you ask him to. And
and there's a lot of good books you can read on the topic too if you want to have further study. For one book that you
my book
up,
is
Heaven's
called
Doors.
Heaven's Doors, Wider Than You Ever Believed by George W. Sarris. I also, by the way,
read, right?
have a little booklet. I'm sorry, what?
It's a pretty quick read, right, too? Oh, there you go, a little booklet, too.
This one is a real quick read. This will be, you can read in a half hour. It's called How Wide Are Heaven's Doors by George W. Sarris.
Okay.
The subtitle is The Biblical Case for Ultimate Restoration. That one, I produced that one about a year ago. A friend said, what we need is not a long book, because people get tired of reading long books. We've seen something short. And so I thought, well, I'll just put that together. So it doesn't have the stories in it that I bring in and a lot of other stuff. It doesn't have anywhere near the volume of information, but it does address the issue very quickly. And it gives you a basic introduction to what this is all about, and deals with a lot of the specific issues. What about Judas? If he would have been better for him never to have been born. How about the rich man and Lazarus? All those things are brought up in that particular book as well.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah, so a lot of good resources out there. Definitely get a hold of a copy of Heaven's Doors or that pamphlet, How Wide Are Heaven's Doors. Really helpful information to educate yourself and kind of like give you introduction into this grand topic.
Yeah.
Well, and George, if anybody talks to you, just tell them you're a Calvinist. Then you won't get
yeah,
there you go. In disguise.
Absolutely. I always joke with people that I'm Reformed but not quite Calvinist, because there was a period of my faith journey where I reformed my thinking from what I was like previously thinking. So it's not reformers, but it's like, yeah, I reformed my thoughts. So I'm Reformed but not Calvinist. And my friends are always like, no, you're not. You can't say that. Because they're pretty strong Calvinists. They're like, you can't say that. I'm like, but I am. And so yeah.
That's awesome. Great. God bless you guys, and thank you so much for giving me the privilege of talking to you. It was really a delight.
Thanks for coming on. It's been an honor having you on, and really we're excited when we found out you were wanting to come on the show, or when you said yes to our invitation. That was exciting for us as well. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I've been very grateful for Derry, because his father and mother, actually, and his uncle, contacted me a long time ago. I think I was still in Massachusetts, so it was probably before the 1990s, or maybe right at the beginning of that time frame, and asked if they could use a copy of my narration of the King James Bible to put on I think it was the internet. Is it just so? It must have been in the 90s, but it was just coming out, and that was delightful. So I was able to meet them and talk with them, and so they've been wonderful, wonderful people. So I've really appreciated your mom and dad, as well as your uncle.
That's awesome.
Well. Yeah, that's fun.
And if our listeners, if you ever want to hear George's voice, if you miss it at all, just go to Bible Gateway. You can listen to the NIV version and hear him whenever you want. Read the Bible to you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for listening. You can check us out on YouTube, on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere you want to listen to podcasts or watch us. We have TikTok, Instagram, all those kind of things. So check us out. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.